It may not come as a surprise to you, but I'm a book loving person. I come from a family of book lovers, and my first job was as an after school library shelver, which I actually wasn't very good at. From memory, I was like really slow, and I was kind of like afraid of the library patrons, unless they were sort of like that kind, like elderly type of person. Which is funny. I mean, I'm not really a shy person, but anyway, I digress. So I have some strong book opinions, but mostly I think that book snobbery is just for fools. Like, books are all about what brings you a little bit of joy or like anticipation or makes you feel something. There really should be no guilt about guilty pleasure reads or movies for that matter. I have like strong memories of reading hidden under a blanket with a flashlight or a torch, as we call it where I'm from, after I was meant to be asleep. And the summer reading program at the local library, which like was actually the one that I ended up working at when I was a bit older, gave you like this really cool goodie bag when you signed up. It was really cool. Anyway, now I live in a different city, and I love when the library here has its summer reading program for kids. They have these like posters up, and it's really cute. They have like themes and stuff. But they've also started one for adults, which I think is a great idea. A lot of us who joined those programs when we were kids, and there's like some nostalgia around them, and so it's just fun. Which kind of brings me closer to my point, the book fair. There's so much nostalgia around this school book fair, and loads of memes and like posts and things like that about how magical these book fairs were and wanting to recapture that feeling. What I remember about them was being in grade school, which was called primary school where I'm from. And the school hall, or like the school gym, would be transformed into a kind of children's bookstore with loads of different books and posters, and sometimes like tie-in stationery or toys that sort of went with books or that kind of thing. It's funny because as I thought about this, I don't have an actual super clear memory of like a specific one in a way. It was usually called the Scholastic Book Fair, which I thought at the time meant because it was in a school, that's what it was. But Scholastic is actually branding. So all those books were from the same publisher. And that's a genius marketing move. It's kind of almost like an MLM a little bit. I was looking this up, and Patty Backus in the Georgia Straight, she wrote about the way that this is a bit sinister when you think about it, which is kind of a valid point. If the school made a certain amount of sales, they would get like a little something towards the school. Her example was a basketball or something like that was kind of, helpful for the school to have or have in their inventory or whatever. So there was kind of like an encouragement or a fundraising sort of element, like if you bought from the book sale, you were also benefiting the school. But all of those books were just by one publisher. And so they kind of cornered the market. And Scholastic itself was like huge, and still has a huge corner on that market, which I think is kind of worth noting because it's just not something I thought about now as more of an adult reader and somebody who works with publishers a little bit as a book blogger and stuff like that. You're kind of trying to avoid those monopolies of anyway. That really is like another discussion for another time. But I also remember the little catalogs that I brought home from school, and I used to like circle things in them that I like kind of wanted to buy, like books. I remember them being very colorful and having little sort of free gift items. I was very sold on free gifts as a kid. The thing is, in the lead up to the book fair, there was a lot of excitement and anticipation, even from kids who were not big readers in general, because there really was a little something for everyone, for every type of kid. And it was exciting. There was not knowing what you might find or getting like a free sparkly pen or a poster or something that came with your book. And perhaps most importantly, you could get the next book in the series of whatever series was your series. And after the book fair, there were weeks of enjoying your little treasure, admiring your novelty erasers instead of listening to what the teacher was saying, sharpening your new pencils that had colored wood in them. Do you remember those? Like the little timber on the inside would be colored and the paint on the outside would be a different color. Those are really cool. Or swapping books with friends so that they could read that exciting bit of the book that you were talking about, like the spooky scene in a Goosebumps or the dramatic scene in Babysitters Club where somebody lost a grandparent or something like that. Some of these books had strong messages about acceptance, friendship, life, death, growing up. A lot of them had subjects that felt very grown up to be reading about at the time, that potentially traumatized us sometimes. And that would probably never be in books now, but they're kind of amazing. So when I came across the book Paperback Crush, it really gave me that like book fair glow. It's by Gabrielle Moss, and it has this hilarious cover that has like, I keep saying like, I apologize. It has this hilarious cover that has a little motif from a lot of these books kind of integrated into the image. So there's like kids laying on beds gossiping, skates, ballet shoes, a horse. You have to have a horse in there. Paperback Crush is a book about books, so I kind of love that. Yeah, it's a celebration and an exploration of this series of books that came out in the 80s and 90s, which were hugely popular. There were so many of these series, and this is what the book is about, and it explores a bunch of them. And yeah, they were really the most clever marketing. They had these exciting hand-drawn or like kind of painted covers with dramatic images from the stories in them, like bright colors and a kind of uniformity within a series. So they had like a collectible look, like all of the ones in the series had a similar cover or cover design anyway. Some of the really exciting ones, like I remember this so clearly. They had like these special covers that had a little window in the paperback cover so that like a picture underneath was kind of partly seen, and then when you opened the cover it revealed the whole image. I still find this exciting. I think Virginia Andrews' books probably sort of started that trend. They were like late 70s, but this kind of thing was big in these 80s and 90s series. These books were all paperbacks. Generally, while the books themselves sometimes had changes in a story world, like sometimes a character might move away or something might happen with a recurring side character might join or something, but they generally functioned in a standalone way so that everything was explained. Sometimes for some of them in the second page of like the first chapter kind of thing, it would have this same paragraph that just gave you a rundown of the story world and how it worked. And yeah, you could just read whichever one was to hand, basically. That was the idea. But you could read them in order and kind of get hooked into getting the next one or looking forward to the next one coming out. Some of the horror-themed books were more standalone. There are some horror series that follow on from each other. But yeah, generally, as a general rule, they sort of had an ongoing story world. They were styled and designed in such a way to have books coming out on a really regular basis, and they're generally not overlong and have a more simple writing style. And this was designed to make them accessible to young readers. They were aimed, they had different series for different ages, but they were aimed at what we would now call like tween to YA audience. So nominally, they were sort of addictive in order to improve literacy. That's kind of like the selling point, and to create this sort of desire in kids to read more. But in reality, they were designed to sell loads and loads of books. The covers were all designed to match in a series, so they looked good, lined up on a shelf, and they were basically collectibles. And while a lot of the series had one author named on the cover, like Francine Pascal springs to mind, a lot of them were written by jobbing ghostwriters. Not all of them, but a lot of them were. And it's kind of impressive, the ones that weren't. People like R.L. Stine, he wrote all of his books, and that's like no mean feat, considering how many of them would come out and how many sometimes spin-off series there were and things like that. Anyway, librarians often really didn't like these books. They kind of considered them commercial trash and something that kids would grow out of, so they felt like they didn't have longevity or literary merit, which is not an unfair thing to think. They were very commercialized in a way, and yet a lot of kids really had a strong affection for them and were invested in getting the next book in the series or collecting the whole series. And even today, Goosebumps and Babysitters Club, for example, remain popular. Others like Sweet Valley High had their own TV show in their day. Actually, Goosebumps has its own TV show as well. And as a little side note, some of the people on the covers were actors just starting out and modeling for the cover art. So sometimes when you look at these, you'll see someone who looks just like Kirsten Dunst or Amanda Seyfried, and that's because they are. The books had some really fun gimmicks to sell them, which I kind of really love about them. I remember one that I got that came with collectible cards that you kind of were perforated and you pulled them out. Some of them came with posters. But there was also little ways the books themselves were exciting, like as you were reading them. As the trend got going, the books started to have little sister series, versions of the main line aimed at a younger audience, featuring the main characters in their like younger years, or sometimes little sister characters from the main line. And then there were spin-offs featuring the characters as teenagers or sometimes even into college age. So sometimes you could really like grow up with these books because as your reading age developed, there'd be another line of the books for your age group. But this meant there could literally be hundreds of books in a series, especially when you add in some of the more popular series had extra side series, like a mystery or a thriller series sort of on the side. And then there were things like super specials that were basically a thicker version of the mainline story, like a longer story. And some of the fun ones were character diary type books, and it would just be sort of written in first person as though one of the characters was filling out their diary. And other kind of ideas along those lines as well. But another feature that I really used to love was that sometimes these books would use a special font for characters within the story. Like if they were writing a letter you're reading a letter in the story, it would be written and it would look sort of like handwriting or a diary entry, that kind of thing. So it was like mimicking handwriting. It wasn't something as a kid that you really saw in books before this time, and it made them feel kind of special and exciting, and I guess it made the characters feel a bit more real. There were series like this about anything. Being a horse girl myself, some of my favorites were things with names like Pony Pals and Saddle Club. There were a lot of these different horse lines, horses and ponies and stuff. I also remember seeing ones about ballet, gymnastics, and figure skating. But there was like way more than this. Like it was huge business, these books. So there were horror ones like Point Horror and Fear Street, science fiction like Animorphs, ones that tried to sort of cash in on movie and TV shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Clueless, for example. You could pick something a kid might be into, like anything, sports, whatever, and they had a book series for you. So to circle back to the book Paperback Crush, I picked up this book because the cover was so evocative of that time. But I really love this book. And if you were into any of these series or just remember them, you're going to love it too. It's partly a history of these book series and how they came to be, and a bit about their, design and things like that. There's a few interviews with some writers and things like that, which is really fun. But it also explores the wide variety of what was available and what was being tapped into, like the sort of changing social stuff. And it's so much fun. It makes fun of the books because often they were very, very of their time, and the cover art could be very, very melodramatic, super cheesy. And they were also the kind of books you weren't supposed to have to hide them from your parents or whatever. They were sort of parent approved. But some of these books could be a bit out there. It really was another time. And the stories tried to be sort of topical and that kind of thing. And also in that era, there were no ideas about trigger warnings and stuff like that. So people seem to think kids might like a really sad story where somebody dies, or need to know about like death or child abuse or something. Drug use was kind of popular, and like anorexia and all this kind of stuff. So sometimes you think back and remember the plots of some of these and just think, like, really? For grade school kids? But that was the time. It was wild. So yeah, I get such a kick out of reading this book, and I love going back and just like dipping into it sometimes, because it's got the colors and stuff are fun, and all the covers, and it's just gently making fun of these books, but in like a loving way. So it's a really kind of laugh out loud funny book to read sometimes. So I wanted to recommend it to you all, but also having had this book for a while, I started to come across these books or seek out some of my own ones that were a favorite when I was a kid. And they kind of brought me a little bit of joy, sometimes a little bit of kind of snarky joy, or just delight in the cheesiness of it all. Some were really not how I remembered them. Some of these books that I've read since have made me laugh or kind of shocked me. And it gave me a little bit of that book fair vibe, nostalgia feeling. So going from here, I wanted to share some of these books with you, and also some of that nostalgia just for fun. So look out soon for some reviews of some books from this era. They're going to contain the plots and lots of spoilers and that kind of thing. So and they are like aimed at adults who remember these books or who are curious. I'm not trying to make a video for children. And I will also probably make fun of these books because I can't help myself. But in a loving way. I think these are some great memories, and sometimes these books are actually really good. I hope that you'll want to join me, because I guess that's kind of the point of the whole thing. But I highly recommend Paperback Crush, and I hope that you will join me on this little journey to share some of these book titles with you, and hopefully I will hit some of the ones that were your favorites, and maybe hit some of the ones that you just didn't even know about. So thanks for watching, and watch this space for some more coming soon. You can check out some of my other videos. I also have another channel and socials, so you can find links below if you want more of that. And if you want to hang out again, remember to like and subscribe. And you can always leave a comment, let me know what you thought, or let me know what else you might want to see. Thank you.